Dear friends, I'd like to share with you a true story that happened during the World War II. Corrie Boom lived in Amsterdam during the war. When the Nazis occupied the Netherlands, her family began to help some Jewish people who were being sent to the concentration camps. Eventually, someone betrayed them, and her entire family was sent to the death camp. Only Corrie survived the family ordeal. After the war, she began to travel across Europe, lecturing on forgiveness and reconciliation. One day after such a talk in Munich, Germany, a man came up to her to thank her for the beautiful talk she gave. Corrie couldn't believe her eyes because he was one of the Nazi guards who was on duty while her family was in the camp. The man reached out to her to shake her hand. Corrie froze, unable to take his hand. The horror of the camp and the death of her own sister leaped back into her memory. She was filled with anger and resentment, and she was shocked by her own reaction. What Corrie had experienced is something that we all experience from time to time. We experience an emotional block when we are unable to forgive someone. So, how do we handle such situations? What do we do when we cannot forgive someone in our life? How can we practice Jesus' instruction from today's gospel? Let us now go back to Corrie's story. As she stood there, frozen, unable to forgive this gentleman, she prayed silently, Jesus, I cannot forgive this man. Lord, give me your grace. At that very moment, her hand, as if moved by some unseen power, took the guard's hand in her own in true forgiveness. She then discovered a great truth that it is not on our own forgiveness that the healing of others rests, but on God's forgiveness. When Jesus commands us to love our enemies, He also gives us the grace to forgive others. So, the first thing we need to do is to pray for God's grace to help us forgive others, just as Jesus did from the cross when He forgave His executioners. The next way to handle this problem is to recall how much God forgives us and how often He forgives. God has forgiven us infinitely more than He is now asking us to forgive. Another way is to see those who have hurt us as not our enemies, but as our fellow human beings, hurting just as we are. Here, Peter's question may resonate within us. How often should I forgive? As Christians, we are called to forgive not 7 times, but 77 times. And that can be very difficult for us. Imagine you have been defrauded by the bank of your savings. Can you forgive? You were rejected as a child by others. Can you forgive? You were duped out of a job because someone lied to get that job. Can you forgive? The answer is maybe not. Well, then what God wants us from us? He asks us to open our hearts to the other so that we may be willing to forgive others. Now, forgiving does not mean condoning the evil action done. Forgiveness is a primary condition for God's mercy to us, and that has no limits. Forgiveness does not show weakness, but strength and power. It enables us to stop reacting and take control of our own life. In fact, forgiveness does more good for us than the one we forgive because it sets us free mentally and spiritually. Then we will be able to see others who have done us wrong in a new light as individuals in need of God's healing, just as Corey saw that old German guard from the Nazi camp. Finally, dear friends, today's gospel invites us to examine our relationships with others, especially our own family members. See if these relationships need to be improved or to be amended. It invites us to take the initiative, the first step in the process of healing and being reconciled with others. And we must always remember, holding a grudge doesn't make you strong. It makes you bitter. Forgiveness does not make you weak. It sets us free in the eyes of God. I like to close with a quote from Alexander Pope, one of the famous British writers. He says about forgiveness, "To err is human, but to forgive is divine." Let me repeat, to err is human, but to forgive is divine.